The whispers, akin to chilly winds caressing my ears, were all I could perceive in the dark embrace of the abandoned asylum. For days I had been here, alone and lost in the twisted corridors, trying to unearth the horrifying tale of this place. The more I searched, the deeper I descended into a realm so unsettling, I feared the walls themselves might swallow me whole. In those harrowing nights, tales of spectral figures and torturous screams echoed through the forbidden halls. Each corner held an unspeakable terror, each creaking floorboard amplified my dread. My mind swirled with dreadful visions, where blood-curdling cries pierced the suffocating darkness, a chilling reminder of the injustices this asylum had witnessed. One fateful midnight, I uncovered a dust-ridden ledger buried beneath layers of spiderwebs and mildew in an isolated storeroom. It chronicled the patients' lives, filled with unimaginable suffering. The writings were unsettlingly poetic, eerily foreboding, as if written by some unseen entity. As I leafed through, a cryptic message caught my eye. A guardian hides in these cold walls, only seen by those with pure intent. Fascinated and utterly terrified, I embarked on a journey to discover this elusive entity, my heart pulsing like a prisoner's under the cruel sun. Little did I know that my quest would lead me into the clutches of an unyielding nightmare. As I ventured deeper into the asylum's bowels, the air grew thick and oppressive, as if the very atmosphere was tainted by the suffering that had transpired within these walls. Shadows danced at the edges of my vision, morphing into grotesque shapes that seemed to reach out, yearning to drag me into their eternal abyss. Suddenly, a bone-chilling scream tore through the silence, echoing endlessly down the corridors. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated agony, a cry that could only be born from the depths of unimaginable torment. My blood ran cold as I realized the scream had come from the direction I was heading. Every instinct urged me to flee, to escape this accursed place and never look back. But something else, a morbid curiosity mixed with an inexplicable pull, compelled me forward. It was as if the asylum itself had chosen me, luring me deeper into its twisted embrace. As I rounded the corner, I found myself standing before a heavy metal door, rusted with age and neglect. The screams had ceased, replaced by an eerie silence that hung in the air like a funeral shroud. With trembling hands, I reached for the handle, the icy metal biting into my skin as I turned it. The door swung open with a grating creak, revealing a room bathed in an unnatural, flickering light. And there, in the center of the room, stood a figure that would forever be seared into my memory, a figure that would haunt my dreams for the rest of my days. A grotesque amalgamation of flesh and shadow, its form shifting and writhing like a living nightmare. The figure's face was a twisted mask of agony, its features contorted in an eternal scream that echoed through the very fabric of reality. Its eyes, if they could be called that, were bottomless pits of darkness, drawing me in with an irresistible pull that threatened to consume my very existence. I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my chest as the figure slowly turned its gaze upon me. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that I was in the presence of something ancient and unspeakably evil, an entity that had witnessed the suffering and torment of countless souls throughout the ages. The figure spoke then, its voice a guttural whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You seek the truth," it rasped, its words dripping with malice, "but the truth will destroy you, as it has destroyed so many before." I tried to speak, to demand answers, but my voice caught in my throat, choked by the overwhelming terror that gripped me. The figure laughed then, a sound that was both mocking and filled with a twisted sort of pity. "You are not the first to come here seeking answers," it said, its form shifting and blurring at the edges, "and you will not be the last. For I am the warden, the keeper of this place and all of its secrets." As the figure spoke, the room around us began to change, the walls melting away to reveal a swirling vortex of darkness and despair. I felt myself being pulled in, my mind and body succumbing to the overwhelming power of the entity before me. And then, in a flash of blinding light, I found myself transported to another place entirely, a realm of endless torment and suffering, where the screams of the damned echoed through the void. I saw visions of the asylum's past, of all the unfortunate who had been subjected to unspeakable horrors within its walls. I saw the doctors and nurses who had carried out their twisted experiments, their minds warped by the corrupting influence of the entity that now held me in its thrall. And through it all, the warden watched, its presence a constant reminder of the inescapable fate that awaited me. For I knew then, with a sickening certainty, that I would never leave this place, that I was doomed to wander here, a prisoner of the guard and its twisted machinations. As the visions faded and I found myself once again in the presence of the entity, I could only weep, my mind and body broken by the horrors I had witnessed. The warden smiled then, a cruel and twisted thing that held no warmth or compassion. "Welcome," it whispered, its voice a sibilant hiss that echoed throughout this entire place. "Welcome to your new home, where the suffering never ends and the screams never cease. For you are mine now, and you will bear witness to the eternal torment of the damned, just as I have for countless ages." And with those words my fate was sealed. There was no escape, no hope of redemption, only an eternity of unimaginable horror and despair, stretching out before me like an endless, inescapable nightmare. As I stared into the bottomless pits of the warden's eyes, a sudden realization struck me with the force of a thunderbolt. The figure before me, this grotesque amalgamation of flesh and shadow, was not the true unseen guardian of the asylum. No, the true guardian was something far more sinister, far more insidious, and it had been with me all along. In that moment, the memories came flooding back, a torrent of images and sensations that threatened to drown me in their horrifying depths. I remembered the countless hours I had spent poring over the asylum's records, the cryptic messages and unsettling accounts that had drawn me ever deeper into this nightmarish realm. But most of all, I remembered the whispers, the constant, incessant whispers that had echoed through my mind from the moment I first set foot in this accursed place. Whispers that spoke of unspeakable horrors, a darkness that lurked at the very heart of the asylum. And now, as I stood before the warden, I realized the terrible truth. The whispers had not been coming from the asylum itself, but from within my own mind. The guard, the true puppet master behind this hellish nightmare, was none other than my own fractured psyche. I had been drawn to this place not by chance or curiosity, but by a force far more powerful and far more malevolent. A force that had been born from the darkest recesses of my own subconscious, fed by the suffering and despair that permeated every inch of the asylum. And now, as the walls of the room began to melt away, revealing a swirling vortex of madness and despair, I knew that there was no escape. I was trapped not only in this physical realm, but in the twisted labyrinth of my own mind, doomed to wander its corridors for all eternity. The warden laughed then, a sound that was both triumphant and mocking. "You see now, don't you?" it rasped, its voice a sibilant hiss that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You are the true unseen guardian, the architect of your own destruction." I tried to scream, to deny the terrible truth that had been revealed to me, but my voice was swallowed by the howling void that surrounded me. I felt myself being pulled deeper and deeper into the abyss, twisting and contorting in ways that defied all reason and sanity. And as I fell, I knew that I would never stop falling, that I would be trapped in this endless cycle of torment and despair for all eternity. The asylum had claimed me, and there was no escape from the horrors that lurked within its walls, and within the darkest recesses of my own mind. I've been having this recurring dream for weeks now. It's the kind of dream that doesn't fade like smoke when you wake. It lingers, the smell of damp and something rotting that I can almost taste in the back of my throat. This place, this old, abandoned building, might fade from view the moment I open my eyes, but I can still feel the cold of the crumbling concrete beneath my bare feet, hear the distant echo of something dripping unseen. The peeling paint, the cracks like spiderwebs across the ceiling, they're etched into my mind. There's something terribly wrong about how familiar it feels. At first I thought it was just my brain playing tricks, but then things started leaking into the waking world. That strange half-formed symbol from the dream wall, now scrawled in messy paint on the overpass I walk under each day. A coin, tarnished and ancient-looking, lying half-buried in the dirt on my morning run, just like the one I'd gripped in the dream. An itch turned into an obsession. I needed answers, even if they were just ways to soothe my creeping unease. Dream interpretation websites, obscure historical records of the city, at first, nothing matched. Then, hidden in the dusty back corner of a second-hand bookstore, was the diary. Leather-bound and worn, its pages brittle with age, it described my dream. Not vaguely, but with chilling accuracy. The twisting hallways, the symbol, that damned coin. The writing ended abruptly, mid-sentence, as if the author had been snatched away. Fear pulsed through me. How could my dream, this echo of a forgotten building, be in a diary written centuries ago? It defied all logic. Yet some desperate part of me wondered, why now? Why me? Desperate for any clue, any connection, I kept digging. I started visiting the places I recognized from the dreams. Each time I stepped through a doorway and felt that jolt of impossible recognition, I half expected the world to tilt on its axis. It was a confirmation, a proof that this wasn't just in my head, but I wasn't sure if that made me feel better or far, far worse. The lines between dream and reality are blurring. The diary I hold in my hands feels like a warning, a lifeline, and a terrible burden all at once. Every night I'm pulled back to that decaying building. With each visit, the dreams grow more intense. I don't just watch. I feel the frigid air raising goosebumps on my skin, smell the rot and dust choking me. The building, it seems to change, twisting and shifting subtly, as if reacting to my presence. Last night was different. A room I'd never seen before appeared, an old library untouched by time. Motes of dust danced in the slant of moonlight filtering through broken windows. And there, on a splintered wooden table, lay the diary. The same diary I hold in my trembling hands. Only this time, it was open to pages that don't exist in my physical copy, pages that speak of rituals, of crossing boundaries. The writing is frenzied, desperate, filled with fear. They knew something, saw something terrible, and it drove them to, I don't know what, yet. The more I tried to make sense of the diary's new revelations, the more I started noticing changes in my own world. Objects from my dreams began appearing in my apartment. At first, it was small things. A feather the exact shade of gray from a bird I'd seen only in the dream, a scrap of parchment covered in indecipherable writing, an old rusted key that fit no lock in my home. I could try to ignore the growing dread, but I couldn't deny there was a pattern. Then there were the shadows. Fleeting glimpses from the corner of my eye, disappearing the second I turned my head. It felt voyeuristic. I'd wake up in the night with the unshakable feeling I'd been watched, the silence of my apartment suddenly oppressive. With each passing day, it became harder to deny the truth seeping into my life. The diary was a conduit, and something on the other side was reaching for me. The dreams weren't a puzzle to solve, they were invitations. Each night, I was drawn into that rotting world, becoming more entangled in its secrets. The building seemed to breathe, its decay a living, malevolent thing whispering my name. The symbols and scattered objects became sinister, tainted with something I couldn't comprehend. They held a weight that went beyond the physical, like they were dragging pieces of that other world into mine. My once familiar city felt like a mask, hiding a monstrous reality just below the surface. Then came the night that shattered what remained of my sanity. I found myself standing in front of the abandoned building, not in a dream, but wide awake. Moonlight painted the chipped facade in an eerie glow. The pull was irresistible, a force beyond my control. Inside, the air crackled, and in the flickering half-light, I saw them. The shadows from my apartment, from my dreams, were solid, shifting forms. Their eyes, pinpoints of cold light, fixed on me with a chilling hunger. What I found in the building's heart was a revelation too horrifying to grasp in full. This wasn't just a point where worlds overlapped. It was a wound in reality itself. The author of the diary, driven by madness or desperation, had opened it. Through the dreams, this entity was seeking not just escape, but a way to seep into our world. And I had become its unwilling anchor. As I staggered back from the abyss, the hungry eyes blinked out. I fled, not knowing if I'd truly escaped or merely been given a head start. The entity whispers in my dreams, promising power and knowledge. It knows my fear, my desperation for answers, and uses them against me. I haven't destroyed the diary. I can't. The same morbid curiosity that began this nightmare now chains me to it. If I can just understand, maybe there's a way to fight back, to close the wound before it's too late. But I fear it already is. I carry the mark of something ancient and evil. The dreams keep coming, the entity's presence lingering like a cold sweat on my skin even when I'm awake. Shadows cling to the edges of my vision, and the symbols from the diary appear in the most mundane of places. It's a constant reminder of the darkness waiting, patiently eroding my grip on sanity. As I share this story, I do so with shaking hands and a racing heart. It's both a plea for help to anyone who might understand and a warning. There are doors in the world meant to remain closed. The cost of looking beyond them is more than your sanity. It's everything. There are things lurking in the spaces between dreams and reality, and once they see you, there may be no escape. I had lost track of time again, the relentless glare of my computer screen holding me hostage. Glancing at the clock, I realized it was already past midnight. My back ached from hours of sitting, and my eyes burned. I stood up, stretching my stiff limbs, and decided to head to the kitchen for a late-night snack. Maybe a change of scenery would help clear my head. The hallway was darker than usual. I flipped the switch by habit, but the bulb must have died. The darkness remained unchallenged. Fumbling for my phone, I turned on the flashlight app, and the stark white LED cut through the shadows. As I moved toward the kitchen, I couldn't shake off a prickling sensation on the back of my neck, the kind you get when it feels like someone's watching you. Reaching the kitchen, I tugged open the fridge. The light from inside spilled out, casting tall, distorted shadows behind the furniture. As I poured myself a glass of water, I heard it, a faint, irregular scratching sound. It was coming from the back door. My grip on the glass tightened. The scratching grew more persistent, as if something or someone was trying to get in. Curiosity overcame my initial shock, and I edged closer to the door, my heart thumping in my chest. Probably just a tree branch, I whispered to myself, trying to be rational, but my voice sounded thin and unconvincing in the empty kitchen. I reached for the door handle, my hand hesitating inches away from it. The scratching stopped abruptly, replaced by a soft, almost imperceptible whining sound. It was like nothing I'd heard before, a sad, desperate plea. I swallowed hard, took a deep breath, and slowly opened the door. There was nothing there but the cool night air and the quiet of an empty backyard. Relief washed over me, but as I was about to shut the door and lock it behind me, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There, in the faint light cast by my phone, were fresh, muddy footprints leading up to the door, and then turning around and disappearing into the darkness of the night. The realization hit me hard and fast. I wasn't alone. The chill of the night air suddenly felt more biting, and the shadows around me seemed to close in. My heart raced as I stared at the muddy footprints, my mind reeling from the implications. If someone had been here, they were gone now. Or so I hoped. I quickly shut the door and locked it, my hands shaking slightly as the bolt slid into place. I turned back to the kitchen, trying to convince myself that maybe it was just some neighborhood kids playing a prank. But the unease nestled deep in my gut told a different story. I decided to check the rest of the house, just to be sure. Every creak of the floorboard sounded like a warning as I moved from room to room, my phone's flashlight casting long, eerie shadows against the walls. Nothing seemed out of place until I returned to my office. The light from my computer screen should have been comforting, familiar. Instead, it flickered unnervingly, like it was struggling to maintain its glow. I approached the desk and saw that the screen was on, but it wasn't displaying my work. Instead, there was a single, open document with a string of jumbled text and symbols that made no sense. It looked like it had been corrupted, but one line stood out, clear and chilling. "Don't look behind you." I froze, every instinct screaming at me to heed the warning, to not turn around. But human nature, or perhaps sheer folly, drove me to look. Slowly, I turned my head over my shoulder. There was nothing but the rest of the darkened room. A breath I hadn't realized I was holding escaped my lips in a shaky sigh of relief. Just a stupid joke, I tried to convince myself. Maybe I had downloaded a virus. Trying to shake off the creeping dread, I sat down at the computer to close the bizarre document. That's when I noticed the webcam light was on, glowing steadily. I hadn't turned it on. A cold wave of realization washed over me. Someone was watching me. Someone had been controlling my computer, playing with me. I slammed the laptop shut, heart pounding in my ears. The house was too quiet now, every sound amplified to an almost unbearable level. I needed to get out to find help. But as I grabbed my keys and headed for the front door, a sudden loud crash from upstairs made me stop dead in my tracks. It sounded like a window breaking. There was no denying it anymore. I wasn't alone in the house. Someone or something was with me, and it didn't have good intentions. My mind raced with panic as I weighed my options. Should I run outside and scream for help, risking an encounter with whoever or whatever was here? Or should I barricade myself in and call the police, hoping they'd arrive in time? I decided on the latter. I sprinted back to the kitchen, grabbed the phone, and dialed 911. The phone rang once, twice, then went dead. I stared at it in disbelief, then tried again. Nothing. The line was completely dead. A sinking feeling settled in the pit of my stomach as I realized I was cut off, isolated. I needed a weapon, something to defend myself. I pulled open drawers, frantically searching for anything that could be used to protect myself. Finally, my fingers closed around the cold handle of a large kitchen knife. Clutching it tightly, I backed into a corner where I could see both the kitchen entrance and the back door, my eyes darting between the two. The waiting was the worst part. Every shadow seemed to move. Every silence seemed to whisper threats. I strained to hear any sound that might indicate movement, but there was nothing. Just when I thought I couldn't stand the tension any longer, a soft, sinister laugh echoed through the house, chilling me to the bone. It was coming from right outside the kitchen. I stood frozen, the laugh reverberating in the empty spaces of my mind, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. It was a mocking sound, low and menacing, and it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. My grip tightened on the knife, my knuckles white as I braced for what might come next. Seconds ticked by like hours, the oppressive silence returning. The laugh was gone as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving a heavy dread hanging in the air. My breathing shallow, I dared to inch toward the doorway, knife poised in front of me. Every sense was heightened. I was a wild animal cornered, every instinct screaming survival. I peered around the corner into the living room, my eyes scanning for any sign of movement. Nothing. The room lay bathed in shadows, undisturbed and quiet as if the laugh had been a figment of my imagination. But I knew better. I knew the danger was real. With cautious steps, I moved towards the stairs, intending to check the upper floor. The earlier sound of breaking glass meant I couldn't ignore it, despite every part of me wanting to flee the house. Each step on the stairs creaked under my weight, sounding alarmingly loud in the silent house. As I reached the top of the stairs, a sudden movement in the master bedroom caught my attention. I paused, breath caught in my throat, and listened. A soft dragging sound followed by a distinct thump. Someone or something was definitely up there. I tightened my grip on the knife, my other hand reaching out to steady myself against the wall. Approaching the bedroom, I pushed the door open with the tip of the knife, keeping as much distance as possible. The room was in disarray. Clothes thrown from the dresser, the window open with curtains fluttering in the gentle breeze. And then I saw it, the source of the earlier noise. The full-length mirror that had hung on the wall lay shattered on the floor, shards of glass scattered around. A movement reflected in a piece of the broken mirror caught my eye. I spun around, slashing the air with the knife. There was nothing but the chilling emptiness of the hallway behind me. My heart thudded painfully in my chest as I turned back to the room, only to freeze in horror. In the reflection of a remaining piece of the mirror, I saw a figure standing behind me. But when I whirled around again, there was still nothing. My breath came in ragged gasps as I faced the mirror again, the figure clear as day, a dark, distorted shadow with no discernible features, just the vague outline of a man. I couldn't tear my eyes away. My body rooted to the spot as the figure in the mirror began to move closer, its movements jerky and unnatural. I raised the knife defensively, my arm trembling. "What do you want?" I managed to choke out, my voice barely above a whisper. The figure stopped moving, its head tilting slightly as if considering my question. Then, in a voice that seemed to come from the air itself, it whispered, "You." Panic surged through me, propelling me into action. I threw the knife. It passed through the figure and clattered harmlessly against the wall. Realizing physical attacks were useless, I turned and ran from the room, down the stairs, and didn't stop until I was outside, gulping the cold night air. Outside, the world seemed normal, the street quiet under the moonlight. But the normalcy of it all seemed surreal, a stark contrast to the terror inside the house. I had to get away, to find somewhere safe to regroup and think through what just happened. As I made my way down the street, the eerie calm of the night enveloped me. My mind raced with questions about what I had seen, about what seemed to want me so desperately. The further I got from the house, the quieter the whispers became, until all that was left was the pounding of my own heart and the distant echo of that sinister laugh. As I walked, my mind struggled to make sense of the night's horrors. The image of the shadowy figure in the mirror haunted me, its whisper echoing in my ears. You. What did it want with me? Why me? These questions churned through my thoughts as I aimlessly wandered the streets, too afraid to go back home, too disturbed to consider it just a nightmare. Eventually, my feet led me to the local park, a place usually filled with laughter and light during the day, but now eerily deserted and cloaked in darkness. The familiar paths offered no comfort, the trees whispering secrets to the night wind. I found a bench and sat down, my body exhausted, my mind wired with adrenaline. I must have dozed off, because when I opened my eyes again, the first weak rays of dawn were breaking the horizon. The park was silent, a stark contrast to the chaos of the night. As I sat there, trying to collect my shattered nerves, I noticed my phone had several missed calls and messages. The screen lit up again, a call coming through. It was my neighbor, Janice. With a trembling hand, I answered. "Alex, thank God. Are you all right? I tried calling you all night. I saw the police at your house." "Police? Why? What happened?" My voice sounded far away, even to my own ears. "There was a break-in, Alex. Someone called 911 from your house, but then the call cut off. They found your front door wide open, and, oh, Alex, it's horrible." A chill ran down my spine. What did they find?" "They found a body, Alex, in your office. They thought it was you at first, but there's no way to identify it. It's hard to explain. They said it was like nothing they've ever seen. It's all over the news." My heart stopped. The figure from the mirror, the entity that had whispered to me, had it been real, physical enough for others to see, or had it somehow taken form when I fled? The implications made my head spin, and a cold fear settled in my stomach. "I'm coming to get you," Janice said firmly. "Stay right there. I'll be there in 10 minutes. As I hung up, the weight of the situation settled upon me. What had I unleashed? Was it looking for a host, a way to enter our world? The questions multiplied, each more terrifying than the last. I waited for Janice, staring into the growing daylight, the park slowly coming to life around me. But the normalcy of joggers passing by and birds chirping felt disjointed, a stark contrast to the darkness that I now knew lurked just beneath the surface of reality. Janice arrived and I got into her car. The sense of safety her presence brought was only superficial. As we drove away, I looked back at the park, half expecting to see that dark figure standing there watching me leave. But there was nothing, only the haunting certainty that this was far from over. The last thing I saw before turning away was my own reflection in the car window. It looked back at me, but there was something off about my eyes. They seemed deeper, somehow darker. A shiver ran through me as a whisper brushed my mind, echoing the figure's final words. "You." Ever since we were kids, my friend Tyler and I had been obsessed with the unexplained, the kind of stories that made you question what lurked in the shadows. So when we stumbled upon the legend of the Silent Song, it wasn't just another thrill. It was the ultimate test of our courage. The legend was simple, yet unnerving. At midnight, if you played this record, you'd hear your fate whispered back to you. A fate that, according to those brave or foolish enough to share their experiences online, always culminated in death. Finding the record was surprisingly easy, hidden in plain sight at a local yard sale, like it was waiting for us. The old woman who sold it to us had a look in her eyes, a mix of pity and dread, as if she was silently apologizing for what she had just set into motion. We laughed it off. It was just a record, after all. How powerful could it be? Back at Tyler's place, we set everything up. His parents were out of town, and we had the whole house to ourselves. At 11:59 p.m., we dropped the needle on the record. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then a whisper, so soft we thought we imagined it, began to fill the room. It didn't describe death. It didn't spell doom. Instead, it whispered of a betrayal so deep, so profound, that it chilled us to our core. The voice, a raspy echo of 1,000 fears, spoke of a friend who would do the unthinkable. It spoke of me, turning on Tyler, driven by an unknown force, by midnight the next day. We laughed it off, nervously this time. The story was absurd. We were best friends, practically brothers. Nothing could ever drive a wedge between us. But doubt is a seed that, once planted, grows with terrifying speed. The day passed in a haze of suspicion and paranoia. Tyler's jokes seemed forced, his glances fleeting and filled with something I couldn't quite place. Fear? Betrayal? Or was it my imagination, fueled by the record's ominous prediction? As night drew closer, the tension became unbearable. We were no longer talking, each lost in our own spiral of doubt. The clock ticked towards midnight, and that's when I found it, the knife, hidden under Tyler's bed, its blade glinting in the moonlight. The confrontation was inevitable. Accusations flew, a friendship unraveling in minutes. Tyler claimed he found the knife in my bag, a precaution, he said, against the prophecy. But how could I believe him? The fight was brutal, a clash of desperation and betrayal. It ended with the knife on the floor and us, panting, staring at each other in horror. Staggering to my feet, I extended a shaky hand towards Tyler. "Look, this is madness," I choked out, the weight of the night's events pressing down on me. Tyler's eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw the friend I'd always known, the fear and confusion mirroring my own. We both wanted to put this nightmare behind us, to laugh it off as just another one of our wild stories. But the atmosphere was charged with an unspoken dread, the record's prophecy hanging over us like a dark cloud. Just as Tyler began to move forward, a sense of reconciliation in the air, the room chilled. A sudden gust, as if the house itself exhaled a cold breath, made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The lights flickered erratically, casting long dancing shadows against the walls, transforming the familiar room into a scene from our worst nightmares. Then, in the dim light, I saw it, Tyler's smile. But it was wrong, chillingly out of place. It wasn't the warm, reassuring smile I knew, but something else entirely. It was eerie, almost manipulative, as if he knew something I didn't. Before I could react, darkness swallowed the room. The silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the chaos just moments before. When the lights flickered back to life, Tyler was gone. Panic surged through me as I called out his name, but only silence answered. Then a whisper, not from the shadows, but from the record player. Tyler's voice, unmistakable, yet ethereal, filled the room, a single word. Betrayal. I found myself lost in the woods. My car had broken down a few miles back, and my phone had no signal. As I wandered deeper into the forest, I heard a strange sound, like footsteps crunching on the dry leaves behind me. I quickened my pace, but the sound seemed to be getting closer. Suddenly, I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I turned around, and that's when I saw him. He was tall and gaunt, dressed in a tattered black suit. His face was hidden behind a grinning white mask. I tried to run, but he was too fast. He grabbed my arm and pulled me towards him, his grip like iron. His voice was a raspy whisper as he said, "Come with me. I've been waiting for you." I struggled against his grasp, but it was no use. He dragged me deeper into the woods towards an old, crumbling mansion. As we approached the mansion, the rain started to fall in sheets. Thunder rolled overhead, and lightning illuminated the decaying facade of the building. He shoved me inside, and the heavy wooden door slammed shut behind us. The interior was dimly lit by flickering candles, and shadows danced across the peeling wallpaper. He pushed me down a long, dark hallway, and I could hear whispers and laughter coming from behind the closed doors. He stopped in front of a door at the end of the hallway and opened it with a creak. Inside was a dimly lit room with a circular table in the center. Seated around the table were people wearing the same white masks, their eyes glinting in the candlelight. The one who had brought me there shoved me into an empty chair and said, "Welcome to the game. The rules are simple. You must survive the night. If you do, you may leave. If you don't." I looked around the table, trying to make out any features behind the masks. Their voices were distorted and eerie as they began to speak. "The game begins at midnight," one of them said. "Until then, you must stay in your seat. Do not speak. Do not move. Do not leave the room." The clock on the wall struck 11, and I realized I had only an hour until midnight. The minutes ticked by slowly, the silence in the room only broken by the ticking of the clock and the occasional whisper from the masked figures. As midnight approached, I could feel the tension in the room rising. Suddenly, the candles flickered out, plunging us into complete darkness. I heard chairs scrape against the floor and the sound of footsteps moving around the room. A hand touched my shoulder, and I jumped in my seat. I tried to stay calm, reminding myself that I had to survive until sunrise. But as the minutes passed, I could feel the panic rising within me. The sounds around me became more sinister, more threatening. I heard whispers and laughter, footsteps and creaking doors. I couldn't see anything, but I knew the masked figures were closing in. Suddenly, a bright light flooded the room, and I was blinded for a moment. When my vision cleared, I realized that the light was coming from the rising sun outside the window. The masked figures were gone, and I was alone in the room. I stood up on shaky legs and made my way to the door. As I stepped out into the hallway, I saw that the mansion was empty. The sun was shining and birds were singing outside. I hurried out the front door and into the forest, not looking back until I reached the road where my car had broken down. As I reached my car, I noticed a piece of paper tucked under the windshield wiper. I unfolded it and saw that it was a photograph. It was a picture of me, sitting at the table in the mansion with the masked figures. But what made my blood run cold was that I was wearing a mask too, grinning just like the others. I looked back at the mansion, wondering what had really happened that night. Confused and frightened, I got into my car and drove away as fast as I could. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Over the next few days, I started to have strange dreams. Dreams of the mansion, the masked figures, and the game we played. I began to notice the same symbol from the hidden room appearing in random places, almost as if it were following me. Determined to get to the bottom of things, I decided to seek out a local historian who knew about the town's past. She told me that the mansion had a dark history. It was once owned by a wealthy family who practiced dark rituals and made deals with sinister forces. The symbol I kept seeing was their mark, a sign of their power. The historian warned me to stay away, but I knew I couldn't just ignore what had happened. I started to notice strange changes in myself. I would wake up in the middle of the night, feeling like someone was watching me. I would catch glimpses of figures in the shadows, only for them to disappear when I looked directly at them. And then one day, I found a black coat and wide-brimmed hat hanging in my closet, the same outfit worn by the mysterious figure known as the Wanderer. Terrified, I realized that I might be connected to the mansion's dark history in ways I couldn't even imagine. Desperate for answers, I decided to return to the mansion. As I approached, I could feel a chill in the air. The door swung open as if welcoming me back, and I stepped inside. This time, the mansion was different. The hallways were brighter, and I could hear laughter and music coming from one of the rooms. I followed the sounds and found myself at a masquerade ball, filled with people wearing masks like the ones from my nightmares. I quickly grabbed a mask from a nearby table and put it on, hoping to blend in with the crowd. As I walked through the party, I noticed that everyone seemed to be having a great time, dancing, drinking, and laughing. But then, I caught a glimpse of someone across the room. It was the Wanderer, and he was staring right at me. I turned to run, but I found myself frozen in place as he made his way towards me, a sinister smile on his mask. As the Wanderer approached, I braced myself for the worst, but instead of attacking me, he placed a hand on my shoulder and leaned in close. "Welcome back," he whispered. "We've been waiting for you. You belong here, with us. You always have." I was stunned. What did he mean? How could I belong here? But as he led me through the party, introducing me to the other guests, I realized that they all knew me, like I had been here before. I decided to stay and try to figure out my connection to this strange place and these masked people. As the night went on, I found myself feeling more and more at ease. I danced, I laughed, I drank. It was like I had always been a part of this world. But then, as the clock struck midnight, the party fell silent. The wanderer took my hand and led me to a door I hadn't noticed before. He opened it and gestured for me to step inside. I hesitated for a moment, but then I realized that I had no choice. I stepped through the door, and suddenly, I was back in the room with the circular table and the masked figures. But this time, I wasn't just a player, I was the one in charge. I looked down at my hands and saw that I was wearing black gloves, and on the table in front of me was a single playing card with the same symbol I had seen etched on the floor. I realized that I had been here before, not just as a player, but as the one who orchestrated the game. I stood up from the table, my chair scraping against the floor. The masked figures turned to look at me, their heads tilted in confusion. "I won't do it," I said, my voice trembling. "I won't be a part of this game anymore." The wanderer stepped forward, his mask a blank canvas. "You don't have a choice," he said. "You are a part of this, whether you like it or not. This is your destiny." But I was determined to break free. I closed my eyes and focused, trying to clear my mind of everything but the desire to escape. When I opened them again, the room was different. The table was gone, and the masked figures were frozen in place, like statues. I looked down at my hands and saw that I was holding a deck of cards, the same deck that had been on the table. I realized that the cards were the key to escaping this twisted game. I began to shuffle the cards, feeling their power coursing through me. I knew that each card represented a player in the game, myself included. As I dealt the cards out on the floor, the masked figures began to move again, their masks changing to reflect the cards they were dealt. I drew one last card and saw that it was the Joker. I smiled to myself. The Joker could be anything, even a way out. As I played the Joker card, I felt a sudden chill run through my body. The masked figures froze once again, their masks melting away to reveal nothing but darkness beneath. And then I heard a voice that seemed to come from within me and all around me at the same time. "You cannot escape," it said. "You are the game, and the game is you. Embrace your role or be lost forever." I realized then that I had been wrong. The cards weren't just a part of the game, they were the game itself. My mind raced as I tried to think of a way out. And then it hit me. If the cards were the game, then I could change the outcome. I shuffled the cards in every way possible. The voice in my head grew weaker, its hold on me slipping. And then, with one final push, I dealt the cards again. As I dealt the cards, I found myself holding the Joker once again. But this time, instead of panic or despair, I felt a strange sense of acceptance. I looked up at the masked figures. They are laughing? Echoes at 3:03 a.m. Every night, as the clock struck 3:03 a.m., my phone lit up with a text message that sent chills down my spine. It began exactly 1 year after my sister's mysterious death, a tragedy that had torn a hole in the fabric of our family, leaving more questions than answers. The messages started innocuously, almost benignly, as if a friend were reaching out. Yet, there was an underlying current of something sinister, a cruel reminder from someone or something masquerading as my late sister. The first message was nothing but a date, the exact date she died. I remember the moment vividly, the way my heart sank and my hands trembled. I was staring at the screen, frozen in a mix of disbelief and fear. My mind raced with possibilities. A heartless prank, a twisted joke in poor taste, or maybe, just maybe, something more. But those doubts crumbled away when the messages grew intensely personal, dredging up memories and secrets that only my sister and I knew. As kids, we had a bond that seemed unbreakable. We spent countless nights under the starlit sky in our backyard, sharing dreams and fears, weaving tales of what our futures might hold. Those moments were ours, sacred and hidden from the world. The messages I received referenced these times with uncanny accuracy, detailing whispered conversations, shared laughter, and even the silly fears we had. It was as if someone had ripped pages from the diary of our childhood, broadcasting them back to me in the dead of night. But then last night, everything changed. The message was different. It wasn't a memory or a date, but an address, followed by a bone-chilling command, "Come alone." The address was burned into my memory. It was the abandoned house at the edge of town where they had found her lifeless body, a place I had consciously avoided, a place that haunted my nightmares. Tonight, against every screaming instinct in my body, I'm going to that house. The need for answers, for some semblance of closure, outweighs the fear gnawing at my insides. I can't shake the feeling that whatever or whoever is sending these messages isn't just playing games. It knows me, knows us, and it's luring me into the darkness that took my sister away. As I approach the house, its decrepit walls and shattered windows seem to stare back at me with a silent, accusing gaze. The air is thick with a sense of foreboding, and the night feels unnaturally quiet, as if the world is holding its breath. This house, now a tomb of memories, stands as a grotesque monument to unspeakable secrets and lost dreams. Pushing the creaking door open, I step into what was once a place of laughter and life, but now is nothing more than a hollow shell. The atmosphere inside is suffocating, the silence oppressive. The air feels charged with a malevolent energy, as if the house itself is alive, its very walls imbued with a watchful, waiting malevolence. With every step I take, the weight of 1,000 unseen eyes seems to press down on me. In her old room, untouched since that fateful day, I find a small, dusty box hidden under the bed. Inside is her diary, the cover worn and the pages yellowed with age. It's filled with her deepest thoughts and fears, confessions and dreams, things she never shared with anyone. As I flip through the pages, a horrifying story unfolds. She writes of feeling watched, of an unseen stalker who knew her every move, every secret. The entries grow increasingly frantic and desperate, culminating in a final, chilling revelation. She knew she was in danger. She knew something was coming for her. And the last entry, a hastily scrawled warning that chills me to the bone. It's not human. Suddenly, the room grows cold, and my phone lights up once more. The message is simple and terrifying. Now you know. A shadow moves in the corner of my eye, and a cold dread grips my heart. The realization hits me like a freight train. It wasn't her reaching out from beyond the grave. It was whatever took her from this world, now revealing its true nature. I'm not here to uncover the truth about her death. I'm here to join her. Panic sets in as I try to flee, but the doors won't budge. Windows shatter, and dark figures emerge, their forms shifting and twisting in the dim moonlight. I'm surrounded, trapped in a nightmare that was once my sister's. The final message on my screen reads, "Welcome home." As the figures close in, the moonlight reveals their faces. They're us, my sister and me, but twisted, distorted by hatred and pain. In those last moments of terror and confusion, I understand the horrifying truth. The house doesn't just trap souls, it mirrors the darkest parts of them. And as the darkness envelops me, the ultimate horror dawns on me. In seeking the truth about her death, I've become a part of it.